Well, the materials that I'm going to be using to build these pontoons are primarily PVC pipe, 3/4 inch, and some styrofoam. This is a 6-inch diameter cylinder of styrofoam that's cut in half. I use styrofoam a lot in my projects, and a lot of people ask, where can I get styrofoam like that? Well, I used to work for a company that made styrofoam architectural elements for houses. A lot of times on stucco homes, instead of big wooden crown molding or plastic window shutters, they make these things out of styrofoam just as a gingerbread kind of thing to make it look nice. So my job for a long time was installing those, and I worked for a company that made stuff custom one at a time out of styrofoam. They'd draw it on a computer and then they would make these things. So I still have a couple contacts, and I'm able to get some big pieces of styrofoam any shape I want. Now for you out there, you might want to do like a Google search for EPS foam. EPS stands for expanded polystyrene. And if you search that, you may be able to find a local place by you that makes architectural foam. And they can probably make you any size and shape foam that you need. What I'm going to be doing here is taking this 3/4 PVC and making an armature and kind of like digging out the shape into the foam so that I can put the two halves together. And at some point it's going to stick out of the foam, and when I'm done it should look something like this. A good place to start, I think, if you're going to make pontoons is figure out where they're going to be relative to the kayak. So I've always just taken the foam and I'll place it next to the kayak. And the idea is to make sure that on the backstroke of your paddle, you're not going to hit the pontoon. It's a little bit impossible to tell unless it's physically in the water, because it's going to be a little bit higher, but you get a good idea as to where the position of the pontoon has to be. I did this on my first kayak, and I worried because it was so short and so far to the back of the kayak that it wouldn't be effective. But I assure you, even a short pontoon near the back of the kayak is going to add a tremendous amount of stability. That's going to make the new pontoon about the same as the old pontoon. So I'm just going to use this one as a template. Cutting styrofoam can be a messy process, so don't do it in the house, otherwise you're going to get in trouble. Unless you live alone, so in which case, do whatever you want. Well, before I start carving out any shapes inside the styrofoam, the first thing I'm going to do is make these armatures and glue them together. And you can see I'm using the old one again for a template, and I've already cut the pieces to size. Now I'm going to take them apart and glue them together. While they're apart, I'll give you a breakdown of the sizes of all these pieces. But again, your pontoons, if you choose to make some, might very well differ. Also, you may notice that I've put caps on the ends of mine to try to keep water from getting inside this armature. That might not be necessary, as that part is going to be embedded inside the styrofoam later on. Okay, what I've got, this is all 3/4 inch. I've got 2 caps, and I've got 3 of these T's, and I've got 2 90-degree elbows, and I've got these 2 that are the same. These are all the same, and then one long one. The long one is about 9 1/4 inches. These are all about 4 1/4, and there's 5 of them. Then I've got 2 short ones that are 3 inches. So that's, what did I say, 9 1/4, 3 inches, 3 inches, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are 4 1/4. Now let's glue them together. Okay, one of these is glued together and one of them is not. And you can see, perhaps you can, it's hard with this fisheye lens, but the one that is behind it is actually taller now. And they were both approximately the same size when I started. But the one on the back here is definitely bigger because it hasn't been glued together yet. And that's the reason that I want to glue them together before I place them on the styrofoam and mark where they're going to be. So, one thing I am going to take note of is which one is which. I'm going to label this number 1, okay? And then I'm going to label this number 1 as well. And this way, if there's any deviation in the size of this, I'll know that it matches up with this particular piece of foam. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of this. This is 36 1/2, it's 18 1/4. That's my center. And why not get this kind of close to center? Put that to that. And what I'm going to do, holding the Sharpie straight up and down, I'm going to mark where the cutout has to be for the PVC. Okay, there we go. There's 1/2. The way I'm going to mark the second one is I'm going to take note on the top where they come together. And I'm going to mark them here and here. And then I'm going to flip this around and mark the other one. Okay, well, there's lots of different ways that you can burn out the foam where the PVC needs to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a hot wire method. You see there's just a length of wire that I've taped or actually wired around this paint roller. And I'm going to heat it up using a torch. And then when it gets really, really hot, I'm going to pass it through the foam, and the advantage to this is that it doesn't make a big mess. Of course, when you're doing this, you really want to be outside because burning styrofoam will make some pretty gnarly fumes, even by my standards. Look at that. No little styrofoam crumbs to clean up, really, except little tiny things like that. Okay, the next thing to do is to take this, that's 1B, and there's 1B, and see how well it fits in there. There's a couple places where it's a little tight, and you can confirm that by taking the other piece and seeing if they'll sandwich together. And yeah, still have a little bit of a gap there. So I'll address these little spots where the elbows are. Just carve them out with a knife until this fits tight. Okay, now that I have the two halves cut in such a way that they'll fit around the armature and they fit together nice and tight, with the exception of a little gap right there around the tops. That's no big deal. The next task is going to be to glue the two halves together. This is the product I'm going to use. It's called Great Stuff. And what it is a polyurethane foam sealant meant for like filling big gaps in walls and such, but it's also a great adhesive, especially for styrofoam. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some inside this cavity here, and then inside the other cavity, and all around the outside of it, and then squish them together, pull it apart, let it tack up, and then I'll squeeze them back together, and these two will be permanently bonded together. Okay, well, I've given the glue plenty of time to dry. You see I taped a little bit around the edges to prevent any kind of expansion, but it really wasn't necessary. But I also squirted a little foam down inside this T, and it has filled this void right here so that water hopefully won't go down inside there. So I guess there's nothing left but to attach these things to the kayak. The old kayak that I had, the way that I did this is I just wrapped some PVC around the kayak and then put this in with a little cotter pin. But this time I think I'm going to do something a little bit different. This time I'm going to use a Scottie Mount to attach it. And here you can see, this is a locking Scottie Mount, so this won't come out until you press the button. See that little button right there? So you press the button, and it releases. And this is a Scottie stem, and I've attached it to a piece of PVC like that. I'll show you how I did this. Here you can see those two small pieces of PVC. What I'm going to do is take a piece of this plate, cut it off, and I'm going to hot glue them to the plate. Set that aside, and using the rest of the plate, I'm going to mix up some resin. And then I'm going to take this resin and pour it into the PVC. Well, here's that resin all dry, and while it's still stuck to the plate, I'm going to drill some holes straight through them. I'm going to start with a small bit first, and then work my way up. The next step is going to be to attach those two little pieces of PVC to a stem like you might find on this Scottie cup holder. So now that I have this assembly and I have a way to attach PVC to a Scottie stem, what I'm going to do is not glue this on just yet. I'm going to attach the Scottie Mount to the kayak, and then I will attach the pontoons to the Scottie Mount when it's on the water, because I really don't know how this thing is going to be oriented. Okay, what I mean by that is that when I attach this to the cup link here, I have a few options. The length of this pipe here determines how far away I am from the kayak and also how deep. The longer this is, the deeper and the further away this will get. So that has to be determined because I don't really know where the water line is going to be until I have this thing floating. Here on the living room floor it's a little bit difficult. So the final gluing and attachment of these pontoons has to be done out on the water. And there's also a pitch that you get depending on how you glue this. Depends on the pitch of the pontoon. And there's also this, which can be adjusted by the position of this fitting right here. This is a 45-degree elbow right here, and the way that's oriented will determine the pitch of it. So all these factors are really impossible to tell while it's here. I want these pontoons parallel with the kayak, and I want it the right proper height when everything gets attached. And well, like I said, we have to get down to the water to do that. But before we do that, we have to attach the Scottie mounts. When I attach the pontoons to my old red kayak, I just use screws, but I noticed that the force pushing up on that pipe was pretty extreme. You could see how the straps I used to hold the PVC down on the old ones broke. So this time I'm going to use some stainless steel hardware, nuts and bolts, to hold the Scottie mount down. The only problem is there's no place on this kayak to really access the bottom of where the nuts are going to be. So I'm going to have to cut a hole in my kayak. You knew that was coming. Now the Catch 120 here has this big area on the back of the kayak and a little tiny dimple right there. That dimple is a like an alignment point for the molds and the machines that make these kayaks. But it's also a good center point on the back here if you wanted to draw a circle, which is what I'm going to do, because I'm going to add a hatch back here. And this is going to allow two things. Number one, it's going to allow me access to get underneath to where the Scottie is, and it's also going to add some storage to the back side of this kayak for whatever you might want to store in there. Let's get this thing marked and cut. Woo! Okay. Okay, now I just got to put some screws in there. First, a little silicone. Okay, now we're ready to install the Scottie mounts. Perhaps to keep that in place, yeah, there you go, that's the way. Okay, very nice.
silicone brabs on the bottom of this, right around those holes. It's important. I think that's the only place it really matters. See, there's like a little dimple right there. That's so water that gets in here can find its way out through these channels. So I just want to put a little silicone right there. Okay, now we've placed that there nice and gentle. And to prevent any water from getting inside the hole where the bolt is, I'm going to put a little right around the top like that. And then install like so. Oh, there it is. Now I'm going to put a washer underneath and a nut, and it's got the little nylon insert in there. Oh, filthy dirty. Found it. Dirty.
A little bit of this right here. I'm not relying on that camera. I mean, my goodness. Yeah, that's you. And you. And one more. That would be you. Why'd you stop? You know?
Well, that's about as close as I can get to mounting these pontoons without actually taking this kayak down to the water. However, this video has already gone really long, so I'm probably going to have to wait for the next video to do that. So stay tuned, where I'll take everything down to the water and finally fit these little fittings here to their final position. And you know, my old pontoons were carved to look like the Head and Super Spook Jr. Well, seeing how these are new and different and they're going on a different kayak, the Catch 120, I'm going to carve them to look like the Catch 2000, my favorite suspending lure. So that ought to be fun too. And then after it's carved, I'm going to paint them and cover them in fiberglass. And then we'll move on to other cool rigging for this kayak giveaway contest. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.